teach me what you think I need to learn right now. I wasn't like, oh, I want to feel more joy, like show me joy. Like the first dose, I said, teach me what you think is appropriate for me in this point in time in my life. And I chugged it, and I was like, all right, here we go.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. How we doing, Tony?
Morning, Bear.
Got a double episode today.
Yep.
Feeling good?
Yeah.
Feeling good?
It's the second one you feel a little looser on.
That's right.
I mean, it's like, it's even meetings in a work day. You get a couple in you, and then all of a sudden you realize you have a better flow in that third or fourth one because you've been blabbing for 2 straight hours.
Exactly. Unfortunately for the guests, my pre-workout is hopefully mainly worn off a little bit. So maybe you'll get a little bit more polished version of me. Probably not, but we'll see. We'll find out. So for today, interesting topic today. Tony and I want to talk a little bit about plant medicine and psychedelics, and kind of bring it to the forefront. And you can expect a lot more about this topic from us here at Born Primitive. It's something Tony's super passionate about, but recently I have become a big advocate of it. And for those that I think a great way to start becoming more aware of this, in addition to this episode, is go listen to the Joe Rogan episode with Governor Perry and
Brian Hubbard.
Brian Hubbard. At this point, it was probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, so you have to scroll down a little bit. Fascinating episode that talked about the use of ibogaine in substance abuse treatment, PTSD, all these other things, which is, ibogaine is the most powerful plant medicine on the planet. But there's other forms of plant medicine that have been used for decades and decades. But only, it seems recently, has it become a little bit more mainstream, and people are starting to embrace a lot of these methods as a way for people from all different backgrounds to, get through certain traumas, gain self-awareness into your subconscious. All types of mental health benefits can be derived from these treatments. And it doesn't seem like it's just theory anymore. There's enough hard data that, I predict, Tony, that in the next 3 or 4 years, this is going to become very mainstream, and hopefully we'll see these clinics popping up all over the United States. I know the Texas legislator is going to take a huge initiative on ibogaine, which I think is awesome. Kentucky had the opportunity. They fumbled it, so now Texas is taking it. So I think that should fast track it. And it's funny that you have more typical conservative figures like Governor Perry embracing something that a lot of would think, oh, that's some hippie crap that they're doing down in South America and the Caribbean. So I'm excited to see where it goes, mainly because the data shows that it's such a strong way to heal individuals that are going through various things in their lives, particularly as we talk about substance abuse, alcoholism. Like, it literally can take a heroin addict and they never want to touch heroin ever again. I mean, how powerful is that? While these inpatient clinics have a 10% success rate, right? And what was it, 90% ibogaine on the first treatment. And then if they do a second treatment, if the first one didn't work, it goes up to 98%. So, it's kind of in that context that we want to explore this further as a brand, particularly with our connection to the military and law enforcement communities. Those are communities that it could absolutely serve. And just something that we want to dive into. So for me, on a personal level, I just got back from one of these experiences in Jamaica. It was a company called One Retreats. The SEAL Future Foundation actually funded it. It was me and 9 other SEALs to go down there. It was a 6-day event. And within the 6-day period, we did 2 psilocybin journeys. So that's mushrooms for kind of the common term there. But in addition to that, we dove into all kinds of other stuff. We were journaling, we were meditating, we were doing yoga, talking through, kind of the things that we were all going through in a very open setting, and sound bath, all the stuff to kind of get you in the right headspace, to work through some of the things that every guy was bringing down there. It was something I've gotten such good feedback from so many guys that when the opportunity arose, I thought, hey, why not? They happened to have a spot free up the day I texted them just to see when the next one was. And I thought that was a little bit of fate. So I decided, you know what, let's jump in with both feet and embrace this, and take it seriously. And, one thing I'll say before I get into the details is I would say it's definitely the real deal, and it's no joke, and know what you're getting into. If you just going down there to try to get, because you think it'll be cool to be in an altered state and get high or whatever, I don't recommend it. I recommend it for the people that want to go down there and do real work and get a glimpse into some of their subconscious and hopefully some self-awareness of things that you've been carrying, and maybe things that you didn't even realize you've been carrying, right? That all of a sudden becomes clear in a very wild and interesting way. So you can leave hopefully having been reset, and with some new thought patterns. And one of the practitioners down there, Kevin, used a very good analogy. And Tony, since you've been so experienced with plant medicine, you can add to this or modify it. But he kind of explained it as, imagine like an old country dirt road, right? That's been traveled, for many years. And there's two kind of tire ruts in the road, right? That have just been dug out over the years of, driving that same path. Well, your default is to drive in the tire ruts, right? If you're going down that road. And if you try to swerve out of the tire ruts, it's not such a great path, and you kind of just naturally steer back into the rut if you get out of it. Well, the ruts in the road are thought patterns that have maybe become kind of solidified as habits, and a lot of them could be unhealthy habits, unhealthy thought patterns, the way we view the world, which maybe isn't how it should be. And by going down and doing plant medicine, whether it be psilocybin or ayahuasca, or of course ibogaine would be the big one, it regrates that road and allows you to have kind of a clean slate to reestablish new patterns. And a new outlook on things. Now, if you don't put in the work when you leave, the likelihood is we're going to revert right back to the old habits. And in 4 months, it's going to be the same old ruts in the road, and nothing will have changed. But if you come out of it with deliberate intentions on things you want to action, and you don't see this, oh, that was fun, I went and got high a couple times with my friends in Jamaica. There's real opportunity to have change. And I think, Tony, you can add to this, but it has to do with the neuroplasticity in your brain. And I think with psilocybin specifically, it's about a 3 to 4 month period where you basically have this window of time where you can kind of re-impression, some of these patterns and change your ways. And that doesn't mean you need to be all screwed up to be eligible for this. I mean, Tony, you're super squared away, at least from my optic, and you've done this a lot. But it's allowed you to kind of sand the edges and fine tune who you are and get insights into things that make you a better human. They say, they don't really want people going down there that are in the red, ideally yellow, red, maybe at the most. But I think I was going down there definitely in the yellow, maybe a little yellow red. I would say I was right on the fringe there. But before I get into the first journey, Tony, let me stop and just kind of let you add. This is obviously me paraphrasing from my own experience, but you've done, I think, close to 30 psilocybin experiences over the last 15 years. Mm-hmm. You've done ayahuasca in Peru, which is, I think, even more intense. So I guess, sanity check me, and I guess, what do you have to add to that?
No, I mean, everything you said is completely valid. And I think what you just said is really important, is that your intention for approaching the space will change over time. Now that's making the assumption that it's something you're going back to reoccurringly, but you need to be clear. You should be clear on what that intention is. And for some people, it purely is exploratory. Like that's where, and I've talked to you about this, is that I have a really unique kind of entryway into the space that I think I'll kind of give a quick kind of background on, because I think others can relate to at what point I was on my journey of working with the medicines and where they might be in their life, and when it may be a good time, or like you said, if you're in the red, like I would say, unless you've exhausted other options, that going to a retreat facility and sitting with these medicines, could it help? Of course, but the risk threshold then does get a little higher. And when I say risk threshold, it's not, as you know, there's no toxic dose of ayahuasca, psilocybin, wachuma. There is, with ibogaine, you do have to be careful, because there's a cardiac arrhythmia that can happen when under the influence of it. Any good facilitator of ibogaine is going to hook you up to an IV, and because if they administer magnesium at any point, and I actually think they proactively administer it with the ibogaine just to prevent that, because the second that is administered, you negate the effects of the cardiac arrhythmia. So just as like a very zoomed out kind of risk assessment for individuals that might be curious, there isn't a toxic threshold. But what you said is important of like where you're at in your daily life. Because for me, let's say 12 years ago, I was exposed through an individual who had worked with psilocybin and had really good results. So just conversationally had some conversations with him. And then to be candid, I was having what I would call now in retrospect, I didn't have this verbiage then to describe it, was kind of an identity crisis when it came to only being an athlete. I had like from the age of 3, I was obsessed with sports. I watched every single Pittsburgh Pirate game. It was such a large part of my identity and that's healthy. Like I'm proud of that. That's not something I look back and say, oh, I wish I would have gotten into other things. Like I love the way sports shaped me. I love the relationships I made. I still to this day just love what I think sports do for you from a psyche and physical standpoint. But I started having severe back pain when I was 16 years old, severe low back pain. I was still able to perform, but that was, and here once again, at the time had zero of the perspective or vocabulary to describe it, is I look back at that pain now and I'm extremely grateful because that took me and cracked this almost Pandora's box of me having to search for what was going on. I was getting the MRIs. My dad was a chiropractor. Nothing was working. So it became like, and here's where we have a little gypsy in us, which you know a little bit about my background. Like we got a little bit of gypsy in us. So I was willing to explore modalities that now are becoming more commonplace, but at that point weren't. And one of them was plant medicine, where I had nerded out and read. I did say I was exposed to an individual who at least gave me like the bare bones of like, hey, here's what some people use these for. This isn't just a party drug that people use. Psychedelics, even back in the 50s, 60s, before they were labeled as a Schedule I drug, were used in a medicinal aspect. And it's not then. Like I actually wrote it down as you were saying it. These have been used for thousands of years in ancient traditions, tribal culture. They've been used for thousands of years. So for me, that identity crisis that I started to describe, it wasn't something as if you would have seen me in my day-to-day, you wouldn't have been like, oh, Tony's really struggling. On the outside, when it came to sports, school, even like females and relationships, everything was good. But internally, there was turmoil going on that, once again, didn't have the skills, didn't have the vocabulary to even describe. And of course, I was smart enough just to check the basic boxes of like, go get blood draw, go talk to a doctor, but I was starting to feel anxiety, depression, all of these different things surrounding. And once again, in retrospect now, I know that it was kind of an identity crisis because so much of that had been built upon sports. With the injury to my back, I wasn't able to perform at the level that I knew I could. So that started to create this almost splinter in my identity, which I think you have two options at that point. Like you can distract yourself through addictions, through even things like social media, like it just basically numb your life in order to deal with that pain. And trust me, there were phases of that too, never to an extreme degree, but certainly little stints where I just wanted to run away from the pain. But then what plant medicines allowed me to do is explore why that pain was there. And could that pain be a teacher? And as soon as that paradigm shifted to it being a teacher rather than something that needed solved, it became an ally. Like pain, and this has been, once again, you could do some Google searches on like monk quotes regarding pain, and certainly not a fucking monk, but pain is an incredible teacher. I would say you don't want pain to be your only teacher, but it will, if you're self-aware and self-reflective, it will provide a catalyst where you have to reflect on what you consider to be your identity. So I'll condense this down so that it doesn't become a 30-minute monologue, is that my introduction to plant medicines was a very unique kind of thing at a young age too. And then I had an experience where, and I'll give the 30-second on it. I set up my room, and here's where, and as you know, I've sat now and helped facilitate for other individuals because of how passionate I am about the space, and just because I see it being done wrong by a lot of individuals. And I've had the pleasure of working with some really skilled practitioners. Is that even my first time I did it, I set up my room in a way that like I look back and laugh at now, like had little sayings written on notes around the room, but intuitively there was something in me that kind of knew like, hey, this isn't just something you're going to do and be like hanging out and like having fun. Like this is going to be a journey, truly. And that's the word that's often used to describe it. So I ingested my first time, I think it was around 7 grams. At the time, I didn't have a scale to even weigh it.
It's a good dose.
7 grams. And kind of there's I'm going to paraphrase because I could sit here and talk about it for 45 minutes, but at one point kind of fell through I was laying on my bed and fell through a trap door into what would be considered a bit of like a kaleidoscope and kind of spiraled down. And when I hit the bottom of that, it felt like I was going to die. Like I literally thought, oh my God, I just took something and I'm going to die right now, which is why that's a common occurrence on these, like the death experience, or people call it the ego death, is a common experience. Once again, didn't have the experience or even the vocabulary to know what was happening. But after struggling for about what was in real time about 3 hours, what felt like about 3 weeks in the actual experience, I surrendered, meaning like, okay, I'm so exhausted, I'm letting go. Like I'll die then if I need to die. And when I did that, and I've had subsequent ceremonies that relate just to this one. And I've told you, I'm still integrating stuff that happened 12 years ago in this ceremony. Is my body and my body, and it's not even, body's not the right word. It would be like whatever my sense of self was condensed into this tight, almost ball of crystal, was vibrating and then shattered. And with that, my name, meaning Tony Strazier, shattered with it. And I was hysterically crying and laughing. It was like, it wasn't a cry where you're like in pain or feeling bad. It was a cry where it was like this extreme relief. And in that moment, I recognized, and now here, I won't go too deep on this and I certainly don't want to offend anyone, is like the definition of God for me. That's where I started to formulate a more spiritual sense of what God meant to me, meaning my identity, Tony Strazier, had cracked and exploded. And within that was this magical essence that now I would consider, I think every human has within them, and that you have the ability, it doesn't need to be plant medicines, to get in tune with that. So I've digressed really far to telling my experience of originally getting into it. So to bring it back to why I initially started telling the story is, whether it's a crisis in your life, whether it's a crisis just internally that doesn't involve others, whether it's pain, whether it's spiritual just exploration, these plants can provide an incredible modality for you to explore parts of yourself that we're just not taught as kids. Like and there too, once you open your aperture to explore this, there are unbelievable practitioners that have been doing it for decades. There are dozens and dozens of books written about the subject that you start to realize, and I love what you said about, I've felt this way for 12 years, is that these are going to make a resurgence and these are going to become a huge part of our culture. They shouldn't replace everything. They like, by no means are they a catch-all, and there are some risks associated, which we've talked about on other episodes. I would rather focus on your Jamaica experience, but they will be an integral part of society, and I think healing, both on a physical level, but then also, and I'm not here to sound too woo-woo, but like our energetic systems as well, which we in the West do not do a good job of giving them ample time to really address the subtlety of what it means to be human. We're really good. If you break your arm, we're really fucking good at getting that healed. But if you have this ambiguous kind of even feelings of anxiety, depression, or really bad, what we're really good at is slapping a prescription down and telling you to take pills for it. What we're really bad at is unpacking the subtlety to that. And that shouldn't just be plant medicines. That shouldn't just be that should be your nutrition, your movement, how you're sleeping, your relationships. But as a catalyst to help really uncover those layers, plant medicines can be an incredible kind of tool in the tool belt.
Absolutely, man. And I think that's the perfect way to put it. Having only done it twice, it becomes a tool. It's not a crutch. It's not a cure-all. It's something that you can become more conscious of, stash it away. And if you're deliberate about it, hopefully that stays relevant in your mind, you know, when those opportunities present itself and you try to revert back to an old thought pattern, or, you know, okay, I've been here before. I now know how to deal with this in a different way. Right.
And we talked before you went, is that you will frustrate yourself to no end because I texted you when you were down there, enjoy the afterglow. Yeah. There's an afterglow to when you really do the work. There's this like feeling of lightness that you get after the ceremony, but fill back into your daily life, take care of your kids, get a couple nights of shitty sleep. That afterglow shrinks and shrinks, and time will do that. So you will drive yourself insane if you are too hard on yourself about integrating the learnings you had from ceremony. But that also doesn't mean you just say, well, this is going to go away. I'm not going to worry about it. But you have to be patient. Like, you have to be patient and have the self-awareness to know that, like, hey, that state of lightness, that's not a drug-induced state. That's because you actually, at least from my perspective, and there's others that would validate this, is that you went in there and cleaned up your psyche and here's where you would get into like your energetic system. You went in there and kind of scrubbed things down, did a little pressure wash. You can do that without plant medicines. And that's where you start to get into having a practice daily to like quiet your mind, especially now with given how much technology is a part of our lives, focusing on sleep, focusing on healthy relationships, on the foods you eat. Those are all contributing to the way in which you show up each day. So these plant medicine ceremonies, and I'd love to hear you kind of touch on it because it's so fresh for you. It's not about them solving that long term. They can provide perspectives that help you solve that long term, but it shows you a different version of yourself that then you can strive towards in your daily, as opposed to like, you only know what you know. And if you've never felt good, especially I think if you grew up with shitty parents, eating shitty food, didn't play sports, didn't move a lot, you don't know what good feels like. So going down there, sitting with these medicines, they can show you really quick, a lot of times through some pretty dark shit, what really good can feel like. And then it's you to do the work to try your best. And it should, like I said, it shouldn't be, oh, I need to always feel this way, but you inch a little closer to that. And then that's what's kept me going back for over a decade now, is then you can really start to get in and fine tune the same way in training, the same way in nutrition. There's levels to it. And as you answer the big questions and get the big things taken care of like, okay, my family dynamic, my relationships, then you can really go in and start to explore broad questions like, why am I here? How can I be of most service? Like, take that into a ceremony and you're going to come out with some really cool perspectives on how to show up better, not only for yourself, but then a larger community.
Yeah. Well, you want me to, should I get into my first journey?
Yeah.
Oh man. So I think I'm really glad I didn't know how nuts it could be. I mean, I feel like people were trying to maybe hint at it, but not in a way that I could really understand it. You know what I mean? In a way, I think that's a good thing. So I will once again say this shit is no joke. But I think 100% absolutely worth it given the kind of hindsight and clarity you have after the experience. But just know, especially if you're going down and you're going to do a couple of the experiences, like you're going to get your shit rocked most likely in some way. They did a really good job of prepping us. That morning we did yoga and meditation and journaling, and then we did like a sound bath thing about an hour and a half before, and some breathing exercises. And of course, you don't eat much. We just had some fresh fruit and like drank some coconuts in the morning. So, your stomach is pretty light. And then we went in there and for us, it was a big room that had 10 mattresses all kind of pointing inward. And they had a bunch of stuff in the center and candles and incense and all the stuff. And then they had a musician in the corner, and he was just freestyling on instruments that was like, I mean, it was awesome. Like the dude had like a million instruments and songs that kind of matched the vibe. It's not like he's playing like rock songs and stuff. It's spiritual and tribal, and you know the deal, Tony. So you go in there, and then you kind of come to the center, and they hand out the different everyone kind of has their own specific dose based on.
How did they dose it? Like, meaning, was it tea?
Yeah, it was in a tea. Yeah, which obviously it tasted horrible, but you just basically chug
earthy.
It. Yeah, very earthy. And then they recommended we put the masks on to kind of make it. I don't know the reason, but it's typically mask on. So you chug it. You high five everyone, wish everyone luck, and then you lay back on your mattress if you want, and you have pillows and stuff, and you just kind of wait for the medicine to hit. So for me,
did they have chairs available too?
No, they didn't have chairs, but they had chairs like around the room. I guess you could have got up and left your little area.
There's another, and I'll keep it to 30 seconds, but staying upright, depending on what you're trying to do, laying is a completely different experience than sitting upright.
Well,
but there's the
second one, I was upright for a lot more, and I'll tell you why.
Go ahead, yeah.
So about 10 or 15 minutes in, I'm kind of sitting there like waiting. I'm definitely nervous, very scared, because I've never done like a drug in my life, never smoked weed. I mean, I'm pretty straight edge like on that front, right? So this is very, and I'm pretty conservative. Like, I'm not the guy that you think like, oh, that guy's going down to do psilocybin. Yeah. But I'm waiting, kind of twiddling my thumbs, and I'm all right, do I feel it yet? I'm not sure. And then very clearly I started to feel it. And for me in the beginning, it was kind of swirls and like kaleidoscope type vibe, which you've already kind of talked about. And I think is pretty common. A lot of guys had a similar thing. But then the kaleidoscope started to turn into a swirl that was going downward into like the darkness. It was like a purple and black swirl. And it reminded me of when you dive under a ship and it's a closed circuit rig. When you get under the ships, if you're diving at night, it's very dark, obviously. But when you get under a ship, it's a new level of darkness that you can only know if you've done that. And I can't explain it. It's like, it's the blackest black you could ever imagine. Well, when I started going down that spiral, I was seeing that darkness at the bottom of it. And it made me startled because I was like, okay, we're going into the darkness. When you're under a ship diving and stuff, closed circuit rig, it can be pretty freaking dangerous. Obviously you make one mistake, you could be dead. So I started to have a shortness of breath, like as if my dive rig was like running out of air. Right. And I started to panic because I was like, all right, we're 15 minutes in and I'm already in like the worst case scenario in the start of this journey. Like everything I feared is now instantly coming true. And we just started. So the medicine immediately told me to seek the light, in a kind of like a calm way. Right. So what I did is I ripped my mask off, and at the time there was still sunlight coming through the windows because it was like 3 p.m. So I basically was like clinging to the sunlight coming through the windows because that was my only source of like comfort at the time. And I would say what was probably in real time a 30-minute experience, it actually showed me a bunch of nice things. Like I was on the beach with my family and it was sunny out and all these things. And it was like a warm, like, all right, I gave you a glimpse of darkness and then I told you to seek the light, and it was also telling me to seek joy. Right. So it was like, those were kind of two paired together. And that like joy and light is your shoreline. That was like the message that it kept telling me in my head. Well, in the back of my head, I knew, okay, eventually it's going to get dark. So what happens when it gets dark and I'm still, have 2 hours left in this thing? So I was still conscious enough to know, okay, this is not sustainable. And then sure enough, man, literally like a straight up monsoon hit. And I mean, it was like,
You mean actual?
Actually, yeah.
Actual.
It was raining and lightning and thunder and, you could feel like the mist coming through the windows, and it was just like a very violent storm. So obviously that made that kind of it get much darker out. And that's when things just went completely south, like into a war that I can never fully describe, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyone that's been in one of those journeys knows what I mean, where you literally, I was hyperventilating, at least I thought I was. In reality, I might not have been, but, just crazy paranoia, and the healers would come over and like they try to like help you breathe through it. I'm squirming around on the mattress. I'm drenched in sweat.
Had you remained pretty? Had you remained stationary, or had you kind of both? Two questions. Had you tried to move around a lot? And for the listener, it can become involuntary, meaning like it's not as if he would consciously be standing up and yelling.
I wasn't standing up. I was trying to stay on my mattress because, for one, I didn't want to be like a drama queen. Like I didn't want to draw attention. Yeah. So I was even in a heavily induced state, I was still like my subconscious of like, all right, keep it together. You don't want to be the drama queen. Like, you put up this front of being strong. And I'll get to the lesson that eventually it taught me, because it kicked my ass so much and I was so scared and paranoid that ultimately I had to ask for help. Right. I had been reaching my hand out, but no one was coming to grab it because like they want you to kind of work through your shit. And eventually, what felt like 20 years, I finally had to be like, hey, I actually need someone to come over here because like I think I'm going to die. So one of the healers came over, and she was helping me work through it. And it's funny how the lesson becomes clear, at least it was for me, after you've kind of paid the price. So for me, going it alone for what felt like an eternity, someone finally came over and I realized, the lesson in this moment was, you don't always have to be the strong one, right? You don't always have to put up this front that you're good at all times, and it's okay to ask for help, right? And it hit me like a ton of bricks because I realized, I've been putting up that front my entire life. You know what I mean?
And for the listener, I just think it's worth saying, like when he says it hits you like a ton of bricks, the lesson, like nothing in your everyday can describe how clear when the message comes through. Yeah. Meaning like it's not like, I think that was the message. Every cell in your body vibrates with what the message was. So just another aside. But.
So that happened. So, and you're obviously super messed up at this point. I started I started just vocalizing the message, even though it was like kind of involuntary. I kept saying, you don't always have to be the strong one. It's okay to ask for help. You don't have to be the strong one. And I just kept repeating it. And then she was repeating it in my ear, like breathe. And she's helping me breathe through it. And then with the storm, you know what I mean? Like was happening all at the same time. And they even changed the music. Like the music got all ominous. They had like a bass drum and a bass recorder. And one lady was walking around with a little rattler, like rattling it in your ear, like sounding like a rattlesnake. So the mood of the room was very ominous. And there were other guys around me fighting a complete war themselves. So like guys are yelling, sobbing, making all kinds of crazy grunts that you've never heard. So like it was like the vibe of the room was intense, right? And we're all going through it. And then I remember yelling up at the ceiling that, and this was totally involuntary. This wasn't like me. This just came out of my brain, but through words. And I kept saying, even during the storm, we will always have shelter. And I just kept repeating that. I probably said it 30 or 40 times. And then she was repeating it back to me when I would say it. And again, these are kind of like life lessons. Like, okay, there's going to be adversity that's going to come, but you still have a support system. And like, you know what I mean? You just got to ride the storm out. You're still safe, even if it's all dark and scary outside and there's thunder and lightning, like you're good. And then that willingness to ask for help and to show that, you know, you don't always have to put up the front, that you're the strong one. And I thought about, all right, CEO of a company, we got over 100 employees, definitely in the SEAL teams. You do not want to show weakness, right? You're judged and evaluated based on your ability to stay composed in stressful scenarios. You know what I mean? So you're ultra sensitive to making sure you always look put together in every way, right? So it's, you know, and then, you know, just my past before that, collegiate athlete, all these things. But again, it becomes very apparent. And then I just like started bawling like a baby for like 20 minutes. It was kind of like you said, it was just this uncontrollable sob.
It feels good, though.
Yeah. Even though the darkness was still there and I was still fighting a war like that, it ultimately just led to that purge. And a lot of guys were too. Like I didn't feel embarrassed at all at that point because you're so in it. You don't care at all at what's going on.
And were you at this point, just a personal question, did you have the moment of what the fuck did I do? Or were you engaged?
Yeah.
Were you engaged by it? Or was it so much that you were like, I fucked up?
I had buyer's remorse instantly. And I said, how did I not know that this is how it could go? Like, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me.
You didn't read the notes I gave you. The third one down was, if you feel like you're gonna die, just die.
So Tony gave me a little cheat sheet before I went. And that was really cool. And bullet number 2 was, if you feel like you're gonna die, let yourself die. And I read it on the plane. I'm like, oh, right on. Like, yeah, that's cool. That's symbolic.
Yeah.
Well, now I know what you mean. And I'll get to my death here in a minute. So that war happened, you know, that was probably 45 minutes of hyperventilating and, you know, freaking out and panicking. And it just, I mean, I can't possibly articulate how intense that is. And only if you've done it, do you know, and you know.
I think that another quick aside, and I told Max this, when I'm parenting my children, I actually think about that exact, what you just described a lot, because that sensitivity, think how sensitive you are in that space. I intuitively think that that's how kids feel a lot of times. So what do you do when a kid freaks out? It's so easy, especially as a dad, to be like, motherfuck, like, stop, like, stop what you're doing. Imagine if one of those facilitators, when you were freaking out like that, would have sat there and yelled at you and said, stop, just be calm, you're fine. Like, that type of energy would have messed you up. So I think Max and I talked about that. Like, that is how and of course I'm not perfect. I certainly still yell at my kids at times, but like, it gives you a level of kind of like softness and support, while you still need to have boundaries. But I think that's the state that kids are in, especially at a young age, a lot, where they're just so sensitive to everything. So when they're crying and throwing a fit, a lot of times the answer is not to just be stern all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective.
Because once you feel that, you feel it, you can connect with a kid in a different way.
So from there, it was interesting because the storm continued to happen, literally and figuratively, of course. And in that moment, for some reason, like the female healers were providing me a lot of comfort, and I was almost clinging to that like feminine comfort in a weird way. And obviously, when you get out of the journey, you try to like interpret like what were those lessons, because some of them aren't as specific or as obvious as like the ones I've already said. And I think from that, because you know, she at one point had taken my hand. And then the other one, like, I think had her head on my chest, and they were trying to help me breathe through it. And I basically was saying like, hey, you guys are really helping. Like, please don't leave me. You know what I mean? And they were like, you're fine. We're not leaving. But I was in such a panic. I was like, do not leave my mattress, because I'm going to die. Yeah. And I think maybe that is rooted in, you know, going through a divorce. And, you know, I don't want to like get too much into it just out of respect to Mal, but like, you know, I'll leave it at that. That whole experience, I think, was showing itself in that moment in a way that I think I had buried that in oh, I'm good. You know what I mean? And you know, that again hits you like a ton of bricks. And then it shifted. Eventually I was like, all right, you guys are good. Like, I'm sure other guys need help. Like I'll ride this out by myself. I switched to, there was a SEAL there that was not on the medicine, and he's actually like certified with all this, and he's kind of one of the practitioners. And I saw him in the corner, and I started reaching to him like desperate for help. And I started thinking about the brotherhood and the SEAL teams and what that means to me. And I started to grab onto that as a source of comfort. And in that moment, I almost got defiant, because I was like, I was so defeated, but that little team guy mindset fired me up a little bit. And then I almost was like, all right, motherfucker, like, you think you're going to get me? Like, I'm a freaking frog, man. Like, let's fucking go. You know what I mean? And I started yelling at the medicine, and I was like, I have my fucking brothers. And like, you know, and I'm, you know, being ridiculous, of course. But in my mind, I was kind of ground myself on like, you know, you can't defeat me. Mm-hmm. And in a way, like I'm glad I started to maybe in a way stand up for myself, but you can't win. Right. And as you know, it's going to put you in your place. And it absolutely did. So eventually he came over and started.
Did he really nerdy question here? And did he come over to you without you having to verbalize it?
No, he wouldn't, because he knew from my previous interactions that my lesson was I need to ask for help. And he said, he's like, dude, you were reaching for me for almost 40 minutes. Like, you were dying, and just like, you were so desperate for me to come comfort you. But I didn't, because I was waiting for you to actually ask for help, because I knew that you needed to experience that lesson. So I finally had to ask, and he came right over, and you know, he was providing obviously a different type of comfort than the girls were. And then at one point he had my hand, he saw my fist clenched, and I was like grabbing my forearm, and I had brought a trident and put it in the center of the room. And before we started the ceremony, I told the guys, hey, like, don't forget who the fuck you are and like what's in your DNA. And I'm putting this in the center as your shoreline. If shit gets south, you know, go ahead and look at that in the center. But I wanted him to bring it to me, but I couldn't vocalize it. But he knew, he could sense that that's what I wanted. So that was kind of a cool thing. So kind of went through that. And again, super intense. And then it segued into, it got so bad after that this is where the death happened. Do
you think you were at about halfway through? Let's call it a 5-hour, 6-hour ceremony. Where were you at this point?
I'm guessing that was about 2.5. Okay. I'm about to get to like the climax where I'm like, you just have to completely submit to just the death. And now I get exactly what you're talking about in that silly bullet point that I was like, this weirdo. What do you mean let yourself die? You freaking woo-woo hippie. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it had got so bad that I had to revert back to the original lesson of seek the light. And at that point, it was completely dark outside, but there was a little light above my mattress, a tiny little light that they had dimmed. And I started hyperventilating again, and it felt like my chest had 1,000 pounds on it. And the girls came over and were helping me again, and I just kept getting back to seek the light, seek the light, seek the light, as out of desperation. Because I remember it had told me the light is your shoreline, which I know is a little woo woo, but that phrase was resonating, and I said, all right, I need to get back to that. I swear to God, the light above me, I basically submitted, and I got so desperate that I said, the only other source of comfort I can find right now is God. And I was conscious enough to know, okay, out of desperation, that's my last safety valve here. So I basically pled to God of like, get me out of this storm and help me. And I looked up at that light, and I was reaching for it, literally. I mean, this was probably for many minutes. I'm trying to grab the light coming out of the light bulb, even though it was super dim. And I swear to God, the light opened up like a spotlight on me, and basically said, you like just submit and like allow yourself to die. And the girl behind me, I asked her, I said, hey, did you guys just turn that light up? And she was like, no. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's a spotlight right now. And she's like, no, it isn't. And I was like, so that's not real? She's like, no. And then I told her, I said, I think I see God. Like, through that light, like I asked, and he, like, the light got brighter. Are you kidding me? And then she's whispering in my ear, be at peace, just be at peace and submit. You know what I mean? And it was this most peaceful, it was like an angel voice. And this is where it gets even crazier. The guy who's playing the music started playing Amazing Grace. And we're talking, he's playing tribal music, all this weird, woo woo shit. And then he plays Amazing Grace when I'm in the middle of that moment. He's across the room. He has no idea what I'm going through. It's not like he's like, oh, Bear needs God, let me play Amazing Grace. And I asked her, I said, is Amazing Grace playing right now? Or is that in my head? And she's like, no, it's playing. And I'm like, this is the craziest coincidence. But that was the ego death. I literally, I think I went limp on the mattress. I stopped squirming. I stopped hyperventilating. And it was like, all right, you're dead. And now we're bringing you back to life. And again, it sounds nuts. People are like, this weirdo. Until you do it and have one of those journeys, there's no way to articulate what's going on in your head. But that was what it was for me. And then the last lesson.
Did it really quick there? Did that transition to you finally deciding to surrender to then feeling like you did let go? Did it still take a while to get there, or once you made the decision, did it kind of quickly?
It was still war. It was it killed me, but it's not like I came out and was like, oh, I'm good now. It was like, we're not done. I killed you once, and here's the interesting thing. So one of the little mental tricks that I used going through SEAL training, particularly in first phase, was I always thought, okay, these guys control everything in my life right now. They can tell me to do whatever they want. They can punish us. They can make our lives miserable. They can wake us up at 3:30 in the morning and make us get wet. All these things. The one thing they can't stop is time, right? So when we're doing log PT, it's like a 2.5 hour evolution. At 3 p.m., they're on a schedule. They're going to stop it, and we're going to go to the next thing. And eventually, these big scary dudes that are instructors are going to go home to their wives that night and be normal, and they're not scary anymore. So I always use that in training. It's just in the back of my mind. Okay, that's the one thing I can control is time, because it's gonna continue. Well, in the middle of the journey, when it got so bad, I reverted back to that tactic of I know how to deal with this. They can't stop time. And the medicine called me on it. Was like, no, I can actually stop time. And I'm going to make you I'm going to show you what eternity feels like. And I know when you talked about yours was 3 weeks, it got to the point where I was convinced that it had actually stopped time. And after I had my ego death, I finally realized I had to take the biggest pee of all time. So I called the SEAL practitioner over and I said, hey man, I got to take a leak. Can you help me out? So he of course helped me up, and I can barely walk, of course.
A lot of times a puke will happen then. So yeah, pee can be a purge. Yeah. People will yawn really bad. Yeah. That's, as a facilitator, you have to be very aware of that, because the fact that you peed is kind of, here, I'm going to get woo-woo, like an energetic purge of almost turning the chapter on that. You know what I mean? But a lot of people will puke their brains out at that point.
Yeah. I don't think anyone puked, but they told us, hey, it's very common if you pee yourself. It's all good. We see everything. But when he came over, I was so defeated. I said, hey man, how do we make this stop? I feel like it's been dark for 9,000 years. And I know if we started at 3 and it's supposed to wear off around 7:30, it's literally been dark for 9,000 years. What did you guys do to us? You know what I mean? I was starting to get mad.
Yep.
Put a bullet in my head. I'm done. You know what I mean? And so he took me to the bathroom. But that was the lesson. It was you can't game it. You know what I mean? You can't get defiant. You don't control time. So if you want to, I'll just endure this. Okay, well, we'll just make time go forever, and you're screwed. You know what I mean? And so again, you had to submit to the. Yep. So I went to the bathroom. It felt like I took a pee that was 9,000 years, but he said it was legit a 4-minute pee. He was like, that was the longest pee ever. So at least it was kind of accurate.
Did you get lost looking down at the pee?
Well, they had little incense candles going in there. And so that was messing me up, because any change of environment, you freak out.
It's like you entered a different world.
And then I thought, for some reason, I thought I had a diaper on, and I was like, oh no. Did I get diapered in the middle? Did I get diapered? I'm a 245-pound, 36-year-old man, and they had to throw a men's diaper. Thank God I didn't. But for a second, I was like, I'm pretty sure I have a diaper on. You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
But that was just the medicine messing with me. So after the 30-year piss, he said, you want to take a walk? And now we're outside. There's some jungle canopy, but as you know, if you kind of change your environment, it can really freak you out, because there's a few fluorescent lights outside, up lighting the trees, and stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's probably a good thing. But I was really on edge and very not comfortable with the new environment. So he started walking me down one of the paths, and it was getting darker and darker. And because he's a teammate, I was like, all right, well, I trust this guy, obviously. But as we got further and further away, I was getting more and more uncomfortable. And finally, it was in my mind so dark that I finally said, hey man, stop. And he's like, what's up? And I was like, don't go any further. And he was like, okay, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go back into the light, literally. So we walked back, and while that in the moment that didn't seem like a significant event, I realized that was the medicine was teaching me the lesson about setting boundaries, right? Because a lot of times I could have just let him just continue me into the darkness, and I wouldn't want to make a big fuss, and I would just let it happen. Because I don't want the conflict or whatever, the reasons are that people don't set those boundaries. And that become very apparent in that moment of like, oh man, I've been really bad at this in my life in many ways, and I need to set boundaries. And also I need to advocate for myself, right? And it's okay to do that. So, I think that was the last major lesson. He took me back into the room, and at that point, I just kind of went down on my mattress and just rode out the storm for like whatever it was, another hour. But I was literally laying there like, this is never going to end. And I'm starting to observe the other guys, and they were going through their own struggles. Some of it was nuts. I won't share their journey details, but there were antics going on and all kinds of things. And then it finally kind of came to an end. And one of the guys who was an absolute joker, who had his own war, he was yelling the funny. In hindsight, it was funny, but not in the moment. But we were all laughing about it the next day. He kind of was the first one to break the ice. Like, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, we're like, we were all like,
someone's got to do it.
We were like, no one said that's how it was going to be. Like, you got to be kidding me. A bunch of hard dudes, at least we thought, you know what I mean? And boy, were we put on our ass. Dudes are drenched in sweat, and just, we felt like, we just did a 1,000-year journey. But it was cool to then, be able to, we had dinner after, and, you're definitely still altered. The medicine is still in you, but you're pretty much sober at that point. But then going into the next day, the clarity you start to see, so I took a video that night before I went to bed, because I was like, I need to make sure I remember all of this. And I had a journal next to my mattress. So there's a few things I asked them to write as I was like yelling it at the ceiling, because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to remember this. Now, I was actually very vivid that I didn't need to even write it down. Like, these, I can rehearse, I can recap these lessons hopefully for a really long time. But in the moment, I didn't know if I'd even remember it. So I had a journal, but to rehash it, I took a video and kind of just summarized the themes that I was feeling in that exact moment. And then the next morning, after breakfast, we all got together, and each guy had an opportunity to kind of recap his experience and like kind of what he learned and the insights. And it was really cool to see how wildly different they can be, but all of them were still really powerful, right? And then obviously, like, the healers were there to kind of give their 2 cents and guide us. And we even like did a drawing or a painting, like with markers and stuff, about like to illustrate symbolically what our journey meant. And everyone kind of talked about it. So a little woo woo, but it was actually really cool. So that was journey number 1. I'll stop there if you want to chime in on anything.
Did you have, so when the ceremony was done and everyone's eating together, did you still feel skeptical about what had happened, or had it turned enough that you were grateful at that point?
If you had asked me right then, are you going to do the second journey in 48 hours? I would have said, you're freaking crazy. No chance. Zero chance. Like, you can't pay me $1 million. I'm not doing that again.
And when did you text me the next morning?
I can't remember. I think I might have texted you that night and was just like, holy shit, dude. What the fuck was that? And that's when I was asking about dosages of like, I'm nervous. Do I even do it again? But I had enough consciousness to know, okay, don't make the decision now. You're all messed up. You just came out of it. You're drenched in sweat. You're compromised. Let this digest. You have 48 hours to think about it. You can pull out last second in 2 days if you have to. You know what I mean? So from now until then, just don't put any pressure on yourself and let everything digest. And I'd say as I got further into the second day, that night, I changed my decision. I said, here's why. Although that was a complete war, I already can see the lessons and the clarity that I was able to get from it that might have taken 500 hours of therapy to really, get to the core of, right? I don't know what this second journey is going to bring, but I have to do it for myself, because if it gives me some insights that make me a better man and a better human, even if it's another 9,000-year war and I have to die again, it's worth it. That I will be glad I did it after the fact, because I'll be walking away as a better man. So I ultimately just kind of gave myself no choice. I was like, I really don't want to do this. I'm terrified, but you're freaking doing it. Also, the fact that there were the other guys there, they were all fighting for themselves. It motivated me like, you know, I need to kind of show up for them as well because, you know, like it's, you got to put in the work, right? And you're here to improve yourself. While you could leave after one journey and probably be still a way better version, like why would you miss out on this opportunity to learn even more in such a unique, you know, it compresses it to 4 hours when it could take me 10 years to come to some of these realizations, and maybe even more harsh way, in a different way, of course, but maybe your whole life comes tumbling down because something you didn't realize. So that's when I kind of changed my decision. And I said, you know what, I just have to trust the process here. And you had kind of said when I was, you know, talking to you, were like, hey, typically the second journey is maybe a little bit better, but it will still connect the lessons, but it might be a much more gentle lesson. And it ended up being right.
Did anyone not participate?
No, everyone did.
Everyone did.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And I think part of it, you know, the Seal Future Foundation had paid for it. So like, and you know, we have egos and we want to be tough guys. Like, I don't think anyone wanted to be the guy that like, hey fellas, like I'm bowing out on the second one, particularly like quitting is not really in the DNA. Right. So, you know, there definitely was probably some unsaid peer pressure, but I think everyone was still really motivated to just be there to work on themselves.
We lost half the group in Iowa after the first one, and I won't because I want to hear a little bit about the second. But we lost half the group, and then 2 more people. We did 5, half the group after the first one, and then 2 after the second.
Oh wow!
So it was down to 8 individuals
Jeez.
by the end of it.
I mean, I get it though.
Yeah.
It's very scary.
Oh yeah,
and I don't fault those people at all.
Yeah, and there was I'll just give the 2-minute on it. Is there was a lady who had, I mean, you have to use the word exorcism. Like they had to strap her down and they had to go get this. This was 7 hours after we ingested. He had already there's 5 facilitators. He had already went back to his little own living quarters because after 6 hours approximately, he's fucking singing and doing Icaros. Icaros is like the song. Yeah, he's spent, and typically by then everyone's, as you said, like everyone's in kind of a calmer state. They're aware. Well, this bubbled up and they had to go get him. You want to talk about he worked with her one-on-one in front of the group for an hour. And the last thing she did was she was spitting at him, swearing, like talking in this weird like language. She arched her back, strapped to this med board, arched her back, hissing at him. And the room felt like it was going to crack. He has his drum and he's singing right from her face. He had spit. In ayahuasca, it's traditional to have like a jug. I forget what they call it, but it has like all of the plants they've worked with. So like tobacco and all these things. And it's this, they call it their juice. And he took a huge chug of it, grabbed her by the back of the head and spit it in her face. Not in like a disrespectful way, but because it's like a traditional part of like their songs. And that's when her back arched and she was screeching. And I'm not kidding. It felt like the room cracked in half and she flattened against the ground and was breathing super heavy. And then 3 seconds after that was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Oh my God.
Dude, that is I look back on that with just incredible appreciation for I'm careful to use this word, shaman, facilitator, whatever you want. Like he studied down in Peru he lived in the jungle for 30 years. So he was the real deal. But yeah, that after watching that's what lost half the group, is because half the people were like, that was the craziest fucking thing I've ever seen.
Particularly if their first journey wasn't that bad, they were like, well, shit, what is tomorrow going to look like? You know, like I might get that dose. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Oh man.
So how did you decide to do the second one? How did that one go?
Went much better. Thank God. I think part of it was I try to manifest like with my intentions going in. But also from talking with the people running it, they kind of said, hey, like, of course this is uncertain, but typically the people that have a war on their first one have a much more peaceful experience on the second one. And it's almost by design. Like we need to break through your shell, particularly with you guys, like, you know what I mean?
You got big shells.
We need to hammer you guys on the first one, because then it opens you up for the second one. And so he's like, I can't guarantee it's going to be a good one, but like he was trying to reassure me that like, it's probably going to be, you know, a good experience. But I was still super nervous. Like when they gave me the tea, my hands were shaking. So, you know, I was trying to manifest positivity, but clearly not that much, because I was like, man, what if I drink this thing and in 15 minutes I'm in the purple and black spiral again, going into the depths of the unknown, right? Like, and then I'm like, oh, here we go. Another 9,000 years and I'll be out of it, right? So I took it, and this time I was like, I'm going mask off. And I want to be more present. And I was sitting upright. I started journaling right away while I'm still able to write. And I was just looking into the center. They had a candle, like a bunch of candles and like a little Buddhist guy, like, a bunch of stuff in the center. I had the Trident up there and a bunch of guys that putting stuff in the center that was personal to them. And I was just waiting for the wave to come, and it didn't come like it did the first time with, the weird shapes and the spiral down. I kind of realized it was trying to give me a sense of peace. But I was fighting it because I also know the medicine can turn on you, right? So like I didn't trust it, right? And so I was trying to almost stay sober, like don't let it, there's little tricks like you can squint and you can grab, like I was grabbing like the seam of the mattress to kind of ground me, and I'd touch the ground, or I'd have a sip of water, or I'd get up and kind of touch my toes. I was trying to like pretend like I'm sober to like trick my mind to not be induced by the medicine. But of course that's not sustainable for, you can only do that so long. Yeah. So I was like, man, I think it's trying to teach me peace here, but I don't trust it. I'm going to fight it. And then, they changed the music at some point. This is probably now 45 minutes in, maybe an hour in. They changed it to more ominous music. Like I think he started playing like the bass drums again, and it triggered a bad memory of the previous one where I was like, okay, the last time I heard this, I was staring at the ceiling fighting for my life. So I actually asked one of the healers, I said, hey, can I go for a walk? And it gets back to like advocating for yourself. I was like, I know where this goes. So I got up, we went on a walk. It was sunny out. I was definitely still super paranoid. So I went and took a seat at one of the, one of the little gazebos. I got a bottle of water. I sat there. She just talked with me. Hey, how's it going? I was like, well, I think it's trying to teach me peace, but I don't trust it yet. And I'm just waiting for the storm to come. And she's, just relax and like, it's okay. Embrace it. And, so I went back in eventually, and I was laying down, and I'm just waiting for it to come. And, one of the other guys that was having a really good experience in the beginning, because he had come back, he had gone to the bathroom, came back in, and kind of, the room's still like somewhat communicating, not completely, but he was like, man, I like this one a lot better. And like we all kind of started laughing because no one was like fighting demons at that point.
Yep.
Well, he ended up taking a turn because I think he boosted a couple times on the dose. About an hour in, they give you the opportunity to do that. And he started fighting his war on the other mattress, like what a few of us were the night before. So I was actually witnessing this in not being sober, but through a different lens. And it filled me up with just an incredible amount of gratefulness, and appreciation that like that dude's over there on his mattress fighting for himself. He came down here carrying all these burdens, and he's showing up, right? You know what I mean? And he's not perfect, but like seeing him, I mean, there were 4 or 5 people around his mattress for like almost 3 hours. It was that bad but watching it, I started journaling of just, man, I'm so proud of this guy, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this. So it was like a gratefulness, but because you're induced, like the most deep sense of gratitude you could ever imagine. You know what I mean? Like it's enhanced by like 100x of like just normal gratitude you would feel on a normal day. And then it made me realize that like the lesson on this journey is that there aren't always threats around you at all times. You don't always have to be paranoid about what's coming. And I realized that in my life, my central nervous system is just wired to sense threats everywhere, because a lot of times there actually are, like, in a way, it's like you get some letter from the IRS that's some, bullshit that you got to do, or, someone sends a letter and wants to sue you. That's complete bullshit. Or there's some supply chain issue, or there's a strike at the port, so we're not going to get our order in time. So, the marketing calendar is now all jacked up, and all these, running a business with 100 plus people, there's all kinds of stressors that can come your way. And you're always expecting like worst case scenario is going to happen. And then same thing in your personal life. Maybe it's, anytime you get a message from the daycare, you think like, oh, she's sick, she's got to go to the ER. Well, that happened once. So like, it's like I became conditioned to never being able to relax because, through real events, but also ones that I was just expecting that weren't happening, I was always on edge and I was always on alert. And I was doing the same thing with the medicine. It's like, okay, it's showing me peace right now. It's trying. It's sunny out. The jungle canopy is vibrant and green and just, you know what I mean? But I'm still like, all right, where's the threat? What's going to happen? And once I submitted to that and just said, all right, I'm going to accept whatever this is going to bring to me, it immediately brought this sense of warmth and peace that there's no way to describe. No way to describe. You know what I mean? And it was almost like 20 years of pressure that I'm putting on myself was all of a sudden just purged. And it was like, just relax. It's okay to allow yourself to feel joy, be at peace. And I even wrote in my journal, it was cool. The guy next to me saw it, and I was barely able to write it because by that time it was hard for me to really articulate it. But I had written some things on my notebook that if like as things got bad, I would look down at and just reread them like a million times to kind of go back into a positive loop. But on the next page, I wrote, relax. There is no storm today, period. And I had my Seal Trident on the notebook just sitting there at the base of my bed. And the guy next to me ended up like peeking over and saw what that read. And he was like, that was the coolest thing ever. Cause I could see it. You wrote it big enough that I could, and then the Trident was right next to it. But I ultimately was able to kind of submit to that. And again, I think the lesson there was a more gentle lesson of like, hey, yes, there's a lot of threats out there, but you need to allow yourself to be at peace and just accept what's going to happen. And that's the only way you'll actually feel real joy. And then once I did that, it was like, I probably had like the last hour and a half, the songs they were playing, even, you know, the female healers that were walking around the circle, like their hair was blowing in the wind and the sunlight, the beams of light are coming through and you see the green canopy. Everything all of a sudden became just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And then you just laid there and appreciated it. You know what I mean? And I was just staring up at the ceiling and just observing the room and journaling a little bit. And the songs they were playing were like just the most beautiful, you know what I mean? And it's to the point where they actually provided the playlist that, cause they did have a sound box in the center of the room. So sometimes when the musician needed a break, they would play like real songs. But when I play those now, when I'm meditating in the sauna, it brings back that emotion of peace and harmony and all these things. So it ended up like closing out in the best way you could imagine. And then it made me realize, okay, now I know why people come down here and do this. Because if you could bottle up that feeling that I had for the last 2 hours, and I mean, that would be, of course it's impossible to replicate that. And in the moment I was sober enough to realize, okay, cherish this because there's no way to replicate this in real life. But it is giving you just a taste of what real happiness feels like, and giving myself permission to feel that. You know what I mean? And you know, by the end, once our one buddy was done, like fighting his war, they started handing out little instruments, and they were playing Bob Marley, and we're all like singing in the center, and you know, like we had a rain stick and little, you know, it was this very joyous camaraderie that we all felt, having a shared experience that very few can relate to, but we all did it together, right? And now it's closing out the ceremony. So like the way it ended was just epic. I mean, like cloud nine, like I'm just looking around like, man, now I get it. Now, and that's when it all kind of came full circle for me. And you know, that's kind of how it ended. And then, you know, we debriefed it the next day and I journaled all those things. And, so that was journey number 2, man, was that different than number 1? And we were joking, like, those weren't even the same. Like, you know, one guy was like, that there's no way that was the same thing. Like, impossible. Now, there are different strains of mushrooms, you know, and I think the one is a little bit more known to be a hammer. And the second one, I think, is, you know, maybe a little bit more gentle. At least it can be. Not always the case, of course, by the one guy that had his bad journey, or I don't want to say bad, challenging journey.
In here, I think I touched when we initially talked about it in your office or when you first got back, is something I'll say and just sit on it and digest maybe for a couple of days, and we can circle back at a different time, is that I don't think people like to put too much on the mushroom as to what they're doing. I think what you're actually doing is the medicine, having worked with these for a long time now, is actually just lifting the veil on what's always there. So it's not as if these mushrooms carry this into you and then show you these things. They can be guides, but what they're doing is lifting a veil on yourself, and then you're exploring parts of yourself that some you are conscious of, others that you're unconscious of. And I think within each individual, you contain the capacity for complete evil and then complete joy, love, unconditional love, connection, community. And my personal philosophy is it isn't just about becoming loving, unconditional, all about others. It's like, yes, that is part of it, but equally a part of that is exploring the darkness in each of us. And we've seen, because what I think happens is if you shove that darkness into your subconscious and don't integrate it, not even integrate it, or you're unwilling to look at it, it will actually shove its way through your conscious in order for you to see it. and then you will act that out in reality. So look at somebody like Hitler. Like that is actually the model I work through with individuals that are doing actual violence in the world and are what people on the outside would consider bad people, is that they're unwilling to look at the shadow aspect of them, and then it shoves its way through out of your subconscious into your conscious. Whereas if you're willing, and that's why I'm fascinated and hold these plants in such reverence, is that if you're willing to go in there and explore that darkness, no longer does it need to shove its way up into your daily reality. Meaning, like, you've went and sat with that. It doesn't mean you don't have to go in every once in a while and explore that, but to relate it to the experiences. And not to say that, like, I don't say this as in a cocky way of like, oh, I'm so experienced, but as you build reps, and it's actually a good indicator for people that I think are really doing the work, is that if I have like when say you have a group of 10 individuals who all have been doing it for a decade, you as a community, when you have a good experience, there's actually more of like shit, like you still appreciate it, and that gratitude, you never take it for granted. Like you sit it and you say like, fuck yes, like I hold that in such reverence, that feeling, that connection. You're right, you can't replicate that in your daily life, but it gives you a good compass for like what we have in each of us as far as a capacity to love, to connect. But what you will see with people who are really doing the work is that, and it sounds like that's why I love you telling the story, and it sounds like those facilitators knew what they were doing, is when somebody's having a bad experience, almost like you were looking at them, when you build reps, you no longer are scared by it. And that's why like it's really important to work with a good facilitator. Is you could be fucking screaming your face off, almost being violent to yourself, and they're extremely calm because you know that like, hey, you need to explore this. Like, this isn't about me telling you anything to get you out of it. You need to explore this. I'm going to give you the space to explore this. Now, there is a boundary there. If you start to self-harm or harm anyone around you, somebody does need to be able to subdue you. But what I have found as I've worked more and more is that person gets the way a group of especially experienced people feel about that person, like they get so much extra love, because once you know what it's like to go through that, you hold those darkness experiences or bad trips. And in ayahuasca, the purge, like I saw the facilitators, there were 5 of them. One of the facilitators who was supposed to be helping people, they drink with you. Even everyone in an ayahuasca, they'll have like 2 or 3 people on the periphery of the Munekia that don't drink. Everyone else drinks, so everyone is in the ceremony. And one of the facilitators who's apprenticing to become a true facilitator went through one of those when they were supposed to be helping. So in a typical workplace, you would think people would be pissed off. I watched it made me tear, like I cried when I saw it. Like the next day, how much attention they gave that person to be like, hey man, good job. And I was like, wait, good job. He was one of us. He was supposed to be working, and he was puking and shitting himself. Yeah. And it's because your perspective on what that means. It's not about, oh, you shouldn't have bad experiences. It's not about, I've done this so many times, I don't have bad experiences. It's like, no, the bad experiences are the best one. And I told you a little bit before you went down, is like, I hold those ones. They're the hardest fucking thing in the world at the beginning, but you will learn lessons from those that you will never learn from a good experience. Totally. So that it was just great to see even people that had worked in it way longer than I have, almost like a child the next day, like sit with him and be like, hey man, great job. Like, good fucking job. You did it. And and I could tell he felt a little insecure about it, but then he was able to be like, yeah, and they're all like, dude, I've done that. Yeah, I'm supposed to be the facilitator times, and I'm the one sitting there. Of course, if it's one-on-one, you've got to be really careful doing that, because you'll freak out the person that's supposed to be going through the journey. But yeah, just a good way to relate to what you said when you were looking over at the guy. It's cool that you landed on that, because people that are unexperienced are like, oh, they need help. Like, how could somebody help them? Somebody do this. And then the people that have done it, it's like, let them go. Like, let them work through it.
Spot on. And even debriefing it with a couple of the healers like the next day, you know, I'm waiting for them to be like, oh my God, that was the wildest thing. Like, are you okay? And they were like very nonchalant, like, yeah, it seems like you had a challenging journey, and you did a great job. You were really putting in the work, you know what I mean? And that was like their summary of my experience. I'm like, wait a second, like, no way.
You're not saying anything about the 9,000 years or
are you kidding me? Like, I just fought a war for 9,000 years. I thought I had a diaper on.
Appreciate me a little more.
But then I realized, like, they see this all the time, and it's not a big deal, and nothing was unsafe about it. Right, that was the thing. In the moment, you think everything's going off the rails, but like, even the second time, like the guy, there's a nurse there, so he asked her to check his vitals, and his vitals were fine, but he literally thought like, I'm dying. But it's like, you're not. And as you already mentioned, you know, with ibogaine, there is a concern there with cardiac arrest or whatever, but they mitigate that with, you know, having medical personnel and the IV and all those things. So it's really, I don't want to say it's like completely safe, because if you are a cowboy and you go do this in the woods by yourself, like that could present real danger. So make sure you're always doing it at an accredited facility that like this is what they do. But I was very fortunate that they were complete professionals and they do this all the time, and just had, you know, hearts of gold, man. And, you know, I think the biggest thing is like walking out of there, like we talked about, it's a good reset. It just gives you a lot of clarity on a lot of things. And a lot of the lessons, like I did not give like an intention when, you know, they say like, oh, when you drink the medicine, give an intention. All I said was, teach me what you think I need to learn right now. I wasn't like,
That's a good intention.
I wasn't like, oh, I want to feel more joy. Like, show me joy. Like the first dose, I said, teach me what you think is appropriate for me in this point in time in my life. And I chugged it, and I was like, all right, here we go. Same thing on the second one. I didn't say, go easy on me. Like, I want to feel joy. I said, once again, hey, if I need to get my shit rocked again, you know, hey, maybe that's what I need. But I'm trusting in the medicine teaching me what you think I need to, you know, be taught. And I think, thank God it was a peaceful one, because I think it was like, all right, this guy had it. You know, he did that. Let's show him the other side of it, so he's not walking out of this like, holy shit. Like but and then, you know, you feel that clarity, and the challenging thing, and they talked about this, is like, hey guys, you know, you're all getting on a plane in a couple days. You're going to go back, and you're going to have kids running around. You're going to have traffic. You're going to have people honking at you, cutting you off, you know, work, you know, you're going back into the real world. So just, you know, make sure you try to integrate in a way. And that's why it's cool. They give you 10 sessions with the integration coaches. So I have my third one next week. I did 2 before I went down there, but, and they pay for it. So you can actually start and this is like a plant medicine guy. So he'll be able to relate to like all the stuff that I'm talking about and be able to interpret it and give his 2 cents. So they give you the tools to really maximize it. But, you know, I did notice that there were things that were testing me that normally would have been much more triggering. And I was able to deal with it in a different way. And in many ways, you know, they used a really good analogy of like, you know, be the conduit, not the battery. They said so many of you you're used to being the battery where you're absorbing all of this energy at all times. And eventually the battery's going to explode because it can't store all that energy. Instead, be a conduit, you know, process the information, let it flow through you, but then just let it go out the other way, and like, don't actually hold on to it. So I've been really trying to do that more, as, you know, when maybe stressful things come across your desk, or you get a text message that's a bit triggering, or normally it would have been. It's like, don't allow that to store as energy. Receive it, process it, take from it what you need to take, and move on. You know what I mean? And don't let that rattle you. So that's what I'm really working on right now, is that, because you get if you do it the other way and you get a few things throughout the day happening, before you know it, you are this charged up battery that has just been receiving and grabbing onto these things. And, you know, I think that, you know, if I zoomed out, might be the biggest lesson from it, because this is not sustainable, and we're all human. We all have our breaking point, and some of us might reach that breaking point quicker than others. Or, you know, if we have good coping mechanisms where we work out and we do sauna and cold tub, like maybe you could sustain it longer. You know what I mean? But eventually, like, we're all human. Like, you can't have that rucksack on your back in perpetuity. Like, you gotta take, you know, a few of the weights out and lighten the load a little bit.
You get really attuned to reciprocal relationships where energy or value is added in a way that raises both participants. And then anything that doesn't do that, so let me define what I just meant by that, is that any type of relationship, or let's say you receive a text where there almost is like an energetic vampiring of your energy, you're like, I'm not doing this. And it becomes crystal clear, certain people in your life, certain situations. For certain people, it could be a job, it could be a boss, where you're like, no, I'm not. This exchange isn't. And that's why I say, like, a reciprocation that leads to the bettering of both parties involved is, you should hold a boundary for yourself where those you're going to involve yourself in. Now, not everyone in your life is going to be this way, but you should at least have some individuals where I would hope that half or the majority of your time is spent around individuals that have that recognition of both how to self-maintain their own energy, but then also how to engage in a relationship that truly is a reciprocation. Because there's where magic happens, is when you get a collective group who are all worried about themselves, because I fucking hate when people act so altruistic that it's all about others. It's like, once you have yourself taken care of, and here's the cliche, is like, once your cup is full, you can start pouring from others. But if you're trying to pour from your cup and your cup's empty, or you have people who are draining from your cup, and yet you rationalize it of this is love, or this is this or that. It's like, no, you engage with people who are able to reciprocate at a level that you feel, and you can feel it when you leave those people. It's like, and there's where you get really good at sensing. Here, I'm using a bunch of woo-woo terms, but like, you'll understand what I mean, is that like, you sense the energy of an individual right away, of like, and you can see behind the mask they're wearing, of like, are they trying to get something from me, or are they genuinely engaged in this interaction because they want to build something together? Those are two completely different energies. And the more you surround yourself, both on a love relationship level, and then even work like that, that's how you create a culture where people trust each other. People are building something because they feel connected to individuals, rather than it being this like dirty exchange just for, say, finances, or like this toxic relationship. And of course, there is a financial component to a lot of things, but there's a deeper energetic relationship that if you can tap into that, it changes not only your own life, but then you start to influence people in a way that like that gratitude will come back to you, simply by people literally being like, you changed my life, or like, you have been such a positive influence. But you can only do that when you're self-maintaining your own energetic system very well.
100%, man. You got to fill your own cup. Otherwise you're going to run out of gas. And there's nothing wrong with being a little selfish at times to get yourself whole. Right. And that's kind of what, again, was nudging me on that second dose. I was like, all right, I'm down here. Right. It's a controlled environment. It's safe. I cannot forego this opportunity to gain those insights, because then I can become a better version of myself for my daughter and for the people around me. Right. So it's not for me. It's actually for them in a way, because I want to be able to be that better version. And there might be some insight that if I don't do this, it might take me 30 years to figure it out. You know what I mean? And that was, again, thank God I did it, because I ended up getting a softball on the second one, and been like, hey, just chill, dude. We just want to show you what peace feels like. Like, it's all good. Yeah. You know what I mean? Lay back and enjoy the music and watch the rays of sun come through the window, and like, not that complicated. But
and there too, last thing I'll close out on is like, that's why it's so important when prepping for these events. And here I'll even take it a step further, is that, say you're not involved in the space at all, people I help that are about to go on a journey, or that I've sat with, is like, hey, make sure you're taking minimum 2 weeks, hopefully a month, even extend that further if you have the space to do it, because what you take into the space, you're gonna have to kind of clean out. And that's why a lot of times the first ceremony for a group can a lot of times just be this like, just shit's getting fucking cleaned out. But if you can, and here's where experience does, you will start to build this skill set to, if you enter the space in a clear state, it doesn't mean you don't have a hard experience, but it's not as heavy. Like, if you take heaviness into the space, that's got to, almost like a splinter, that's got to get worked out of you. If you can go in clean, meaning like the foods you eat, certain ones have an influence over the space, even the media you're consuming. Then the layer deeper than that, and here's where I had a mentor of mine say it to me, and it hit me like a sledgehammer. He said, Tony, why don't you approach your day-to-day the way you do ceremony? And it like stopped me, because I wanted, of course, I'm a quick talker. I always have an answer for everything. Like, and it stopped me like, he's so right. He's like, the respect I give to ceremony, why not do that every day? Now, him and I, we talked through the nuance of that after he said it, but it's been ringing in my consciousness of like, I've worked with these plants so long that I approach it with such reverence. And he's like, yeah, the next level for you, Tony, is approach every day like that. Can you hold that reverence on every day? Because then everything you consume, like, there you really start to shed these micro addictions of things that like, they're not a true addiction, but maybe it's even like, like you eat too much meat. Like, if you're not doing that before ceremony, I'm not telling you not to eat meat, but like, find a balance there. Like, what is actually best for your body? Not what's best to maintain as much muscle as possible. What's best for you to feel the best version of yourself? Because those are two different things. So that's the next level for me then. And fuck, it is a work in progress every day, is those principles that I've learned from the space, instead of applying them both in the pre-build up and then the after build up, it's like, can that become truly the way you hold reverence for that? Can you hold that same reverence in relationship, in food, in the way you speak, in the way you move every single day? And that's a lifelong journey there. And that's my fascination and reverence for the space, is that those lessons I wouldn't have been able to get to had it not been just continual exposure, continue working through just baggage, to then you land on these little golden nuggets, and then you work through some more baggage, layers, another golden nugget. And then over time you can start to reflect, and you'll have this in a year, I guarantee it, is that you start to piece together and be like, whoa, my 3 years, I'm a completely different human than I was 3 years ago. And like that, I think for the human spirit is actually very, very healthy to be turning yourself over. I think they say like at a minimum 7 years, but I truly feel if you're putting in the work every 2 years, your reality should look very different.
I agree. Yeah, man. Well, I guess for the listeners, like, I was a little hesitant to get into details of it because, again, if you haven't done it, it's very hard to relate. And I also don't want to scare anyone off. Like, obviously what I presented, like that was some wild shit. But I think the main takeaway is like, if someone's like, knowing what you know now, would you do it all over again? It's 100% yes. If you had asked me that 10 minutes after the ceremony in the first one, I would have been like 100% no. But you get perspective, you get some retrospect, and it does, you walk out of it and I think it's such a better state. And I just want to, even though like they're not, of course, paying me to say this, and I don't even know if they'll listen, but I really want to thank One Retreats. They're down in Jamaica. Kevin, V, Abby, Ariel, Patrice, true professionals down there. The curriculum they had, the whole day was planned out, but it was all the right stuff, man. It was all working on your mental health and journaling and yoga and sound baths and massages. And it's right on the ocean, right on the water in Jamaica. You got the ocean breeze. It was just, such a peaceful environment that they were creating because they know you might be going into a storm, right? And then they need that the setting is so important, as what they're doing down there. I just think they're true healers. That they had a group right before us that was all parents who had lost a child. You know what I mean? And I had asked them like, hey, how different is it when like a group of SEALs come down here versus like other groups? And I was kind of expecting them to say like, yeah, you guys are carrying way heavier shit, and you guys is like your ceremonies are way wilder. And the answer was kind of like, all right, everyone's coming down here for a reason. And then they gave that example of the group before, and imagine that experience and that purge, but also the same thing, that bond with you have a bunch of random parents that don't know each other. Only they can relate to that trauma, right? And they're down there getting into some deep work and deep healing together. I mean, you leave there 6 days later, imagine how they all felt about each other, right? So I can't thank them enough. And for anyone looking to explore plant medicine, obviously there's a lot of stuff out there. Just be careful with what you get into. There's probably a lot of cowboy shit popping up. So make sure it's a place that's legit and, doing it the right way and doing it safely. And I think this is going to become more mainstream in the U.S. here pretty soon. Right now, you kind of got to go abroad to do it. But Tony, I appreciate you nudging me in that direction. It's funny. Like, again, I never in a million years would I think I'm the guy going down to do.
I didn't think
and
that
honestly,
either.
like, I'll admit, growing up, like, like you get into high school, people start screwing around with mushrooms and stuff like that. And I always thought that was like so despicable. I was like, these hippies going to Grateful Dead concerts and taking mushrooms. Like, I'm playing football, I'm drinking protein. You know what I mean? I definitely, like, in that phase of my life, definitely look down on it as you guys are like morally corrupt and like, you know what I mean? You shouldn't be running around drinking alcohol when you're 16 and taking mushrooms and going to concerts and stuff. Now, I think the recreational side, I'm still like, it is what it is, but I definitely see it in a way different light than I do now because I realize this is a plant. You're not taking heroin, you know what I mean? It's people have been doing it for thousands of years. And it does allow you to access that subconscious in a way that I think the plant exists for that reason, right? And it's not like you're going to get addicted to it and, oh my God, I need to have mushrooms tomorrow. It's actually kind of the opposite. I'm like
the complete opposite.
I am good
for a year.
Yeah. They're like, yeah, I'm like, no, I'm good, guys. Like, I'm solid. You don't have to worry about me. I'm not going to be a repeat offender. You probably have to convince me to come back, but thanks. Just a totally different perspective on it. And I, we talk about agency and taking control of your life. In the nutrition episode, we talked about this. Is like, if you feel like you're in a rut or you just can't get out of the same thought patterns, or you just need to shake things up a little bit, depending on where you are and what your circumstances are, this might be something to kind of consider. And it's going to take some courage, and you know what I mean? It's going to take some commitment. But if you've been trying therapy and cold tubs and saunas and all these other things, and you're kind of like, man, I still feel kind of the same, this is a way to maybe put that on warp speed and maybe get you to the place that you've, really trying to get to. So I really encourage, and Tony, I appreciate you leading me down that path. And I think there's probably, a time for me in the future where I'll get back into it. But as you kind of said, not to be too woo-woo, but the medicine will find a way to kind of call you. You know what I mean? You're not going to seek it out and be like, oh, well, I need to do one a year just to like check the box. Something will probably happen in my life where I get called to do maybe ayahuasca or, maybe ibogaine if we want to really send it. But I'm grateful for the experience. And if I never do it again, I'm totally fine with that. And I'll take the lessons learned and try to implement them the best I can. Yeah.
And that should be like, I love that approach to it is, if you only need to do this once in your life, only do it once in your life. Like that's why never in a million years do I project that like the way I've approached the space, which has become truly like a passion, a calling, and then something I know I'll be more and more involved in as my life moves forward. Like that doesn't mean I don't become an advocate that everyone should be doing it all the time. It's extremely personal. And there are a lot of people I'll sit with and say, hey, you shouldn't do this. Like and of course it's for them to have the autonomy and free will to make the final decision. But there are individuals where it's like, do as much work as you can in your everyday first. And then, either if you're just feeling an extreme pull towards it, or like you said, if you've exhausted options and you really want to try something that can have a profound impact in a short amount of time, then certainly explore it, but it shouldn't be the first thing you go running to. So I appreciate you having the courage and vulnerability to share your message. I know, dude, I wouldn't have been able to, the way you talk about it, it fits your personality though. Like I think I did probably 15 before I would tell anyone just by myself, because I didn't it was so foreign. I had no sounding board to really talk to it. And I did talk to some people, like some very close people about it, but so I appreciate you being willing to share it on a platform.
Well, on that, at this point, we want to be, it's real, man. Here's the thing, people probably look at me and they're like, and I even, people vocalize this, like, oh man, you're killing it. Like you're crushing it. And they see Born Primitive and they see, you know what I mean? And it's like, yes, there's components of my life where I'm doing well, but don't be fooled that there's not a war that I'm fighting in the background in a variety of ways. And in a way we probably all are. Now, some people probably got a pretty good hand and, they have a stable marriage and their kids are all awesome. And
I would disagree.
But some people might be like, all right, this shit ain't that hard. But I think for most of us, life's really fucking hard, man. And that's why I'm willing to kind of be vulnerable about it, because people probably have the perception, oh, a guy like that's all squared away and he's just so strong and solid and I'm the one that's fucked up. It's like, no, we're all there with you. And that's why, again, I think it's important just to be open about it, to make it relatable and make people realize that they're not alone in this. You know what I mean? I think the people that are super that don't have all these challenges are definitely the outliers, right? And if you are one of those people, be very grateful, because there are wars out there that you won't even ever know about because you happen to find the perfect partner and you have perfect kids and you're financially squared away and where you live, there's not crazy traffic. You know what I mean? You could draw a really good hand where all these other stressors that could, there's not some family illness or whatever. You know what I mean? Take your pick. It could be a variety of things. And then there's other people that literally draw every one of those cards and they're fighting for their lives. Right. So, hopefully for people listening, some wisdom can be gained from this, and maybe it can nudge. Maybe if it's just one person down that path, and maybe that's a life-saving event for them. Maybe they were circling the dream that would have ended in a suicide or something like that. If we accomplish that today, it's worth it. And last thing I'll say on a kind of admin front, if you guys feel like you're getting something out of this podcast, we definitely appreciate the regular listeners. We get messages all the time, but if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. If you listen on Spotify or YouTube or Apple, wherever you do it, just do all the likes, all the subscribes, and comment if you can. It really helps us. Obviously we want to continue to do this, and it's a good opportunity for us to just get in a long form way, put out hopefully good content, but relatable content. So if you haven't done so, that would be the one thing that Tony and I ask of you. Of course, this will never be something you have to pay for. So that will call it even if you can do that. And Tony, I'll give you the last word, man.
No, let's close out there.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Bear. See ya.